Okay, folks, if you're here and you wanted to learn about some great research about CNOs in the United States, particularly African American CNOs, looking for just ideas on diversity and how we can promote that. And we've got some great panelists here today. We have Dr. Dunkley is here today. We have Dr. Boston-Leary is about to come in just a couple of minutes, and we're gonna get this on the screen here. Oh, I forgot to start my timer. Let me start my timer, and it's not gonna take 2 minutes, y'all. It is not gonna take 2 minutes, so no worries. There we go. There's my timer. And got the chat going here. This is going to be good. I feel it. This is going to be a great day. Once I confirm we're online, I'm going to bring my guests on the screen. We have Dr. Dunkley in the building.
Hello.
And we have Dr. Boston-Leary in the building. So I'm excited about both.
Hey, Dr. D.
Hey, honey, how are you?
You.
Good.
All right. Without any further ado, let me bring them on the screen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you. Dr. Dunkley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. And Dr. Boston-Leary, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, Rollis.
Yeah, glad to have you. So today we've got quite a few things to unpack and talk about today. And one of the things that I think that, and you were instrumental in getting all this put together, which I appreciate, Dr. Boston-Leary. I appreciate you coming on today and not only doing that, but also organizing an effort to have several from the community be on the show, because we're looking for more diversity, obviously, when it comes to the nurse population and also nurse leadership. And I also appreciate not too long ago, Katie, you had actually put together a little video, which I did share with one of the HR associations recently, about how important it is to have diversity, not just on the frontline staff, but also all the way up to the C-suite and leadership. So thank you for that. Now, since you were instrumental, Katie, in getting Dr. Dunkley on, I was wondering if you would just tell me why you thought she was such a great fit for today.
Oh gosh, so hopefully that's the easiest answer. But it's probably one of the more emotional questions you're probably going to ask me today. So prior to the pandemic, I really had a thought about how I wanted to impact improving diversity in nursing leadership. So it was during a point where I finished my PhD and I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. And it just was planted in my spirit that I had to do this. So then I went on LinkedIn, and Rollis, LinkedIn is a great connector platform.
Yes.
And I started searching for people, and I came across Daihnia's profile. And she was the first person I called on that list of people that I felt that would be a good partner and support with, really the effort, which I hadn't really defined yet. I just knew I want to do something. So I wanted a thought partner as well, in addition to someone that would work with me on execution. So I reached out to her, and she was yes all the way, which gave me a lot of confidence to keep moving. And with her saying yes and encouraging me all the way to keep going, we were able to build a coalition of 4 nurse leaders, including me, to go to Black Nurses Rocks convention in Mississippi prior to COVID. And we did a panel discussion on why nurses of color need to raise their hands more for leadership positions and how to position themselves. So Dr. D is a professional sister to me, where I watch what she does. I admire everything that she does. And right around the time that we were both starting to really build our profiles in this space, her research that she did for her dissertation on Black CNOs and the experience of Black CNOs took off. It went viral after our event together. So there's just been this across the pond admiration for her, and I just, she just makes me smile, and I'm just so.
Aw. Don't make me cry today,
Wow,
Katie,
that was
please.
amazing. I love it. That is better than any introduction I
Thank
could have
you.
tried to have done. That was amazing.
Thank you, thank you. And the feeling is mutual, Dr. Katie. I absolutely admire everything that you've done. And, you've been such an inspiration in terms of your success and being a CNO. And you're somebody who I always said I aspire to become. So lots to learn from you. And I'm so glad we connected, even if it's just virtually. And I'm so glad we were able to meet at that panel in person before everything kind of blew up.
Yeah, right.
The pandemic.
Yeah.
Because we had plans to do more.
Yeah. And we will.
We will.
Well, that deserves it. That introduction was so strong. That deserves it right here for sure.
Thank you.
So before we get into, because I do want to ask Dr. Dunkley about her research she's done, which was a big part of the reason that Katie mentioned she was going to have you on the show today. Joe, can you just acknowledge some of the new folks coming in who are signing in today so we can kind of acknowledge them in the comments?
I don't see any comments just yet.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure I don't.
Actually, yes. So we have Dr. Rosina. She's coming in from Houston.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Hey,
And,
Dr. Z.
We also have Brian Hudson. He is coming in from St. Pete, Florida.
Hi,
Awesome.
Brian.
Okay, great. We got Brian in here too. All right, we're excited to have everyone here today. And as you come in, go ahead and let us know where you're signing in from, and let us know what hospital you work at or what part of healthcare you're working in. And if you're not working in healthcare, you can tell us about that too. But feel free to put that in the comments. So, Dr. Dunkley, I'm definitely intrigued about what your research revealed when it comes to what does that look like. If we know, first of all, let's update our audience roughly how many there are that self-report as African Americans, and then how that compares to how many actually make it to the CNO level percentage-wise, roughly.
So I think maybe we start from the larger scheme of things of the 4 million nurses roughly that represent the profession. About 20% are minorities. Now that's inclusive of all minorities. The number gets smaller as it relates to Black nurses, which represent about 6% of that total population of minority nurses. So now, if you can imagine, with that disproportionate number, the higher you go in terms of the career ladder, the smaller the representation is. And so of all the CNOs, Black nurses represent roughly about 9% of the total number of CNOs from that whole population. So certainly underrepresented group, and there's much to be done in terms of increasing diversity, not just at the CNO level, but throughout all different levels of leadership within nursing.
Right. Now, just curious, did you see perhaps any causes, any things that you could see that is kind of restricting that from happening? Because it sounds like there's actually even more of a disparity just in the frontline nurses even than the CNOs, based on what you're just telling me. If you're saying,
oh yeah, it's throughout. It's throughout. We know that there are racial discrimination issues. There are issues where nurses of color who are qualified are overlooked. Their voices aren't heard. They feel censored or silenced, or afraid to even volunteer themselves for these positions because they're being overlooked. And just that feeling of having to do twice as much and work that much harder to obtain a position, whereas their counterparts would not be judged at that same level. So those are some of the recurrent themes, along with a lack of mentorship and guidance and opportunities for mentorship and sponsorship.
And just curious too, do you find that there's disparities are bigger in certain parts of the United States? Like, for instance, does the East Coast have more of a concentration of African American or diverse CNOs than, let's say, in the Midwest or let's say the West Coast?
Well, my study wouldn't be able to tell that because it was concentrated on the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. But I'm certain that in the more metropolitan areas, you would probably, just a guess, that you would see more of a representation of diversity in those groups. Yeah.
Well, we're definitely also very, very happy to have Dr. Katie Boston-Leary on because she's actually walked in those shoes from everywhere from frontline nurse all the way to CNO. So we thank you for being here and arranging all of this. So tell us about how does that land on you when you hear some of these numbers? What are some thoughts that come to mind for you?
Well, I mean, it's very real, and it's from my experience, I recall feeling outnumbered, right? Whenever I would go to conferences or, meetings, state meetings that had that CNO representation, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 or 4. In a lot of cases, I was the only one in the room. And then there'll be assumptions made about with questioning to find out how I got there. So I feel that the most popular question I received has been, were you in the military? Which I never was. So there's a belief that the way I probably got there was the structure that propelled me there. But that's not the case at all. It was someone who was not a person of color that decided to give me a shot because they had a need, and I was serving in the interim role, and I did a good job and proved that I could do it, and I formally got into the position. But the other thing that I'll add is with what I faced a lot was, and I've except for one case, my secretaries have been white. And whenever I would walk into a room with my secretary, who would attend a meeting to take notes, the assumption would be that she was a CNO and I was a secretary. And it became this, this game that we would watch play out because my secretary took note of that before I did, actually.
Wow.
And she would actually say, watch their reaction when you walk in the room and you tell them who you are.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's the real issue, and if for a while you fall into a bit of you get blinders on because you feel so happy to be there. In some cases, you don't realize that you become the token Black person, my colleagues would point, my friends or people in my circles would point of color. They'll point that out to me on occasion when I would post pictures from an event that I went to, a conference, and they'll say, there goes Katie, the only Black person in the picture. So
oh my goodness.
It's a real issue. It's a real issue. Dr. Dunkley mentioned the fact that there are only 6% of nurses that are CNOs that are Black. There are only 11% of nurses that are Black overall. And that's a number that needs to move because there is an opportunity for the community, the representation in terms of community being 30%-ish more African American. That should play out as well in the nursing profession. There's no reason that it shouldn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The representation of our communities is certainly not matching in terms of what the face of the profession looks like.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some more comments coming in. Go ahead and share some of those, Joe.
Yes. So we have Sage Smith. She is coming in from Ava, Missouri. She's a volunteer. And Brian Hudson said, "Go Katie." And Dr. Rosina said, "This is the truth."
Yeah. She's also of color as well, and she's been on our show just recently, actually. And she's kind of run into some of the same things, some of the same phenomena you're talking about. So let's kind of move to possible solutions. What are some things that we could do I heard one of them as Katie was speaking, which really landed on me quite well. It took a person who was not of color to take a chance on you, which I thought was great. I don't know if there's additional parts you want to shed light on there, or Dr. Dunkley, if you want to chime in too on your end from your research. What are some possible solutions that we could take? What could we take just to start to make some effort towards turning things around?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes folks, get a little bit of tunnel vision and they just kind of accept what is. And I think one of the things that we can begin to do is to kind of challenge the status quo at every point that we can. And having conversations like these is one way to do that, to bring awareness to the issue. When you get comfortable in your role, it's kind of like, it becomes routine, it becomes mundane, and everyone else's concerns kind of fall by the wayside if they're not brought to the forefront of your mind. And so that's one solution, and absolutely providing more opportunities for guidance and development, role development of minorities in practice. I think many of them feel underqualified or that they may fail if they're placed in the position, and giving them that leverage, that guidance and support through mentorship is one thing, but as Dr. Katie mentioned, sponsorship is the golden ticket. You have to have the opportunity. So you can have all these skills, but if somebody doesn't, if you're not like a real go-getter who's like chasing down these positions, you got to have somebody to say, hey, I noticed, your strengths, and I'd like to sponsor you. I'd like to give you some opportunities to shine and become more visible. It happened for me. It's kind of similar story. I wasn't a CNO, but I got to the level of director, and where I got my start in management and leadership was not from a person of color. And that set me off on that trajectory. So it's absolutely paramount.
Love that. How about you, Dr. Boston-Leary?
Yeah, I was listening to a talk by Dr. Kendi, who authored that bestseller regarding that's titled "How to Be an Anti-Racist,"
Mm-hmm.
and he mentioned about how white privilege can be leveraged in a positive way. So when you do have people that when I've had people that don't look like me, not only take a chance on me, but have to justify to others why it should be me, that is that leverage right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, but of course, on the other end, I'm aware of that. And I remember one of the positions I was promoted to, it was a senior director position. And because of what she had encountered or heard from a number of physicians, and this was in an area that was predominantly white in Maryland, and which I always tend to find myself working, but she felt that she had to circle back with this physician who didn't really offer a strong argument to why I shouldn't be in the role. And she said, you need to go pay him a visit. And I paid him a visit to mend whatever fences, if you will, or to assuade him that I'm qualified for the role, not to interview, but just to have that conversation. And I remember the way I felt, where it was more of a talking down to, if you will. He was pointing to the plaques on his wall and how I'm nowhere near where he is because of what he's done and where he's been. And it just again, it's an indication of what other dynamics play out, where you're in a position, you're in a role, and you're happy you're there, but you constantly have to prove yourself. You constantly have to jump higher. And you see the disparity also with the expectations with yourself compared to some of your other colleagues. Not consistently, but it's very real. And so there's this constant need to always overperform.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't overperform, even at the minute you rest on your oars, something could wipe you out. And you have to develop a strong backbone to realize that Well, after a while, it took me a while to realize that I got here, even though someone gave me a chance. I'm a woman of faith, and I am not going to worry about losing this opportunity. If something happens to it, it's not my will. It's just the way God intended. So that's what helps sustain me.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I was at a point where I was going crazy. I'll go in at 5 a.m. and not leave till 8 p.m.
Mm,
My son, who's doing rather well, thank God, he barely saw me because I had to overperform 100% of the time. I felt that that was my ticket to stay where I was, even
right.
though I was very qualified to be there.
Can
So,
I, no, go ahead, Kate.
yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead. So I did see some of
Mhm.
that play out in Daihnia's and Dr. D's research as well with other CNOs, because that's just a reality.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So one of the themes, one of my overarching themes that came out of the research was living in a constant state of readiness, right? So that theme basically summed up the feelings of the CNOs that I interviewed, and I interviewed 10, that they constantly felt the need to overperform, to always be ready, to always, at any moment, if someone asked you a question, to always know the answer. There was a constant pressure to overperform, as you mentioned, and it was what someone described as a black tax that no one else had to pay. But
Mm.
because the spotlight was on you as, the only or the first, or there weren't any others that looked like you in that role, then that spotlight was even shining even brighter on you. You felt like you couldn't kind of let everyone else down who was looking up at you as having this prime seat and opportunity. It's like you have to do well, whereas others may not feel that.
Uh-oh. I see a little pause.
Uh-oh.
There we
Did
go.
I,
Yeah, yeah,
did I
Yeah,
freeze?
your
something
Okay.
audio
happened
went,
at the top.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were getting to a great
I'm
point and
so
it just like
sorry.
paused. You're like,
I'm so sorry. Where did it leave off?
yeah.
I'm so sorry. It's on my
Um,
end. It still
you
looked like I was moving.
yeah, you interviewed 10 CNOs,
Yeah.
and as you went to those interviews, you were explaining the results of those interviews.
Right. So that theme about living in that constant state of readiness was a description of that constant pressure to be successful, to be good at your job, because you were representing so many who aspired to be in that seat, and you couldn't let everybody
Yeah.
down.
Yes, I
But
could
then
see
at,
that.
at, at the same time, so there was that pressure. It was like a blessing and a curse almost, because
Mhm.
here you are, and you're representing so many who are aspiring to get there. um, but then there's that pressure from everyone whose eyes are on you, like, okay, how's she going to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and is she going to fail in this position? So like I said, at the drop of a dime, you had to know the answer to everything. You had to study the landscape of healthcare so that you're prepared, and overly so, just to be considered, qualified.
Yeah, and that has to be exhausting. I mean, and it's so much pressure. One of the things that I did recently, I got a chance to talk about diversity in talent acquisition,
Mhm.
specifically in front of a healthcare HR audience. And I wanted to pull an example from another industry altogether. So I pulled an
Mhm.
example from the NFL. Now I went back and did some research. For a long time, they thought that black quarterbacks would not. They're not going to be able to make the NFL. They just didn't think that they had what it took to run a team, right? So for many years, you did not see black. You could see black running backs, like everybody knows, Jim Brown and O.J. Simpson and all these different people who were black running backs that were famous back then. But you did not see black quarterbacks. It wasn't that there wasn't a supply of black quarterbacks that were good, because there were lots of them out there. One of the owners finally just came out and said it. He says, number one, I don't think that that teams will play for black quarterbacks, and they're not going to want to work, basically work, because the quarterback is seen as kind of like almost like a CNO, kind of like the head of not the coach of the team, but he's up there, right?
Team
And
leader.
Yeah, team leader. Thank you for that. And so they said, well, we don't think, and we don't think the fans are going to come as much. That was his reasoning. But what ended up happening in 1968, the first starting black quarterback, his name escapes me, was for the Denver Broncos back in 1968. He finally got a shot. He won. He won like 11 games, a ton of games. He almost won Rookie of the Year, and to up until I think John Elway, he held the record for the most TDs for a rookie season. Now, believe it or not, they did not invite him back the next season to be a quarterback. So you can be any other position like running back or what, but you can't be a quarterback. So he's like, no, I'm out. So he says, just release me, let me go to another team. The coach actually blackballed him and talked to other teams where they didn't want to hire him as a quarterback. So he ended up becoming a wide receiver and actually had a pretty decent career in the NFL as a wide receiver. But it wasn't a bad ending to this story, because I looked at 2020. Out of the 32 teams, 10 of them had starting black quarterbacks. See, now it's just a normal thing. And if you look back at the argument of teammates not wanting to play and fans not wanting to watch, well, as far as fans are wanting to watch, you could buy the whole NFL for $100 million. Now you'd have to have hundreds of billions of dollars to buy all the teams in the NFL. So I think sometimes it's fear of change, and it's fear of things that aren't even real. Like that owner had a fear that wasn't even real. I'm wondering if some of that plays into what you're talking about. Well, if we make this person a CNO, that maybe they're attaching some fears with that. And so I don't know if you want to talk to that and see if there's any correlations there.
Yeah, is that for me or for?
Go ahead, Katie, please.
I do think that the biases do come into play. I do think that's plays a role. However, I think that it's interesting to use that example, that football reference, because even with the video that I did for you, Rollis, we talked about the C-suite and how there isn't that diversity typically in the C-suite. And in the NFL, you don't find a lot of black GMs, right? There's been movement with at the quarterback level.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But you don't see a lot of black GMs, and then I don't know that there are any black owners in the NFL. So,
there are not.
And it's not that we don't have black billionaires, right? You know,
right.
So,
right.
I think there, and that's the other part, is that there are the biases, but then there are the structures that keep things the way they are.
Yes.
And to a certain degree, I think those structures remain in place that impacts the ability for black nurses to be seen as leaders. I remember I used to have to intervene, and I intervened in a number of different situations, but I found that I had to intervene a lot with situations where there's a perception that when I would get excited that, oh yeah, black nurse joined my team, yeah, excited. And then you start hearing from the manager, because I would have some, I would want to know how that nurse is doing, because that's part of my unspoken strategy, is to diversify my team. So you hear comments about, this nurse is not a team player, she doesn't go out with us when we have our happy hours, she doesn't talk about herself much, she doesn't participate in the potlucks, and you have to, and that's part of the education. Like, well, wait a minute, like, yes, I had to work myself out of that, because culturally I was taught not to share my business.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
I was taught not to eat other people's food unless I'm going to pay for the restaurant.
Exactly.
But it's not that I'm not trying to. So those are the things that tend to create these invisible walls for nurses.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is so real.
Because the inclusion piece is missing, where even with if a black nurse or a nurse of color, not in all cases, but in some cases, if they're stating their mind, they're being aggressive. I had to mind my attitude and my approach to things, and I could be pissed off at a meeting for something someone said. I remember I worked with a surgeon who was always late, and whenever he was late and he showed up for the meeting, he would say, "Oh, tar baby, I had a tar baby, I was late." And I was like, I want to respond to that, to tell this dude that he can't say this.
Mhm.
But I had to, but my reaction would have been what people would have remembered more than what he said.
Mm.
So I had to always mind how I reacted to things. I can't be myself. I had to, my persona at work, and we all have different personas, professional versus personal. But I really had to keep things under control because I
Yeah.
always had in the back of my mind, I can't feed the stereotype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are the invisible walls that impacts nurses to be able to be seen as leaders.
That, you know what, this is really cool. You opened up this up because I never would have thought about that before. And there's a lot of okay. So whenever we do recruitment videos for hospitals and things of that nature, one of the things they say a lot, okay, it's used a lot, is we're like a family here, right? And one of the things I always like to do whenever I'm interviewing them when they say that we're like a family is I want them to describe what the word family means to them, or what does it mean when they say family. Give me some examples of how you think it operates like a family, because everybody doesn't even associate the word family the same. Because
Right.
if I had a really bad family life coming up and it was tough, I may not think of a family being great, because it really depends on the person's frame of reference where they're coming from. So to use your example, I love this, is that if you're gauging if someone's a team player and that they're part of a family because they get involved in our potluck, but that same person has been raised their whole life, like what you said, you don't share food. I don't know what their kitchen looks like. I don't know how they cook their food. I was told not to do that. So I could see how that, and all of a sudden they're judging this person. Oh, they're not a team player because they don't want to share in our potluck. Wow, I never thought about that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a
And
great point.
Yeah, I just one quick point. Because I do have some nurses and nurse leaders that will reach out to me on LinkedIn that will say, "Tell me what I need to do. I've hit this wall. Yes, I made it to the manager level, but I've tried and no one's giving me a shot." And I asked them that specific question: how do you engage the people that you work with? Have you, one opportunity for you if you haven't done it, break bread? And they'll go, "Yeah, but I don't have time, and I don't think I have to do that because I don't want to have to share my personal life." And
Right.
I have to say, well, but that's part of what's required. And
Yeah. Yep.
I'm sorry, you have to. That's part of what you need to do. Meet with someone over, and you don't have to go to dinner at the at the end of the day if you have your family to go to. Invite someone to breakfast or lunch and just sit with them and
Mm-hmm.
eat with them.
Yeah.
Those are the simple things you can do, and open up a little bit, right? It's because those are the cultural things that we also have to break through. Not that we have to change, because we are who we are. We're raised
Right.
how we're raised, but it's okay to open up a little bit and let
Yeah.
people in a little bit, because part of leadership is vulnerability
Mhm.
and doing something you're not comfortable with. So that's part of the coaching that I do.
I love
With
that.
people reach out to me.
A great point, Katie, is that nurses sometimes, and depending on your culture and your background and your comfort level with networking, is not really taught as a strategy for for career growth. And that the nurses that reach out to you, and I'm sure there have been a few, are certainly better off for hearing that from you. That is what's expected. You're going to have to build relationships in a leadership role, and sometimes with people you don't necessarily care for, and so breaking out of your shell and learning how to network and networking effectively and how to communicate in difficult situations is a skill that is absolutely critical
Yeah.
in that role.
Yeah, and you realize that it's more of a mindset, because in a lot of cases, and these are all my trials and errors too, right? It's not that I figured this out right from the beginning.
Right.
And I found that after I opened up a little bit and engaged people differently, I realized, oh, that wasn't so bad actually.
Mhm.
I
Right.
actually enjoyed that. That
Right.
was not too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
So it is that's just what's required. The relationship is part of it.
Yeah, and that mentorship to guide someone who's like hit that wall is lacking.
Yes.
right? Which is
Yes.
part of the issue.
Well, and also too, you mentioned as far as you may not care for the person, Dr. Dunkley. You said that just now.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we have been turned off by something that maybe through our cultural, just the way we do things culturally, but when we get a chance to really know that person, we actually become like them for their qualities, where initially we didn't. I'm wondering if some of that plays into it, because there's certain things that you just raise in, like you said, an African American household, or if we take Hispanic or we take Asian American, whatever it is, they're raised in a certain way that sometimes we interact differently, we do things a little bit differently, and we may say, well, I don't really care for that person's attitude, the way they looked at me, or whatever the case is. And when we find out more about them, we find out we actually like them. So I wonder how much of this could be solved just by getting to know each other better, like what sister Dr. Katie Boston-Leary mentioned, just getting to know them, take the time to get to know them. I thought that was an awesome point.
Yeah, having an open mind and going into situations with an open mind, especially when networking and trying to build relationships is key.
Yeah.
And things are always subject to change. Like you said, I could start off saying I don't care for this person, and then now we're best friends. So again, keeping an open mind.
Yeah. In fact, I know a few people who couldn't stand each other and they end up getting married, right? So it could be as far as that.
It could be the opposite too.
Okay, so Joe, I know we got some more comments and possibly questions. Did you want to go ahead and shed some light on some of those?
Yes. So let's see. Dr. Z said, it's an awful feeling. We should never have to encounter this. And she was talking about earlier, she was talking to Dr. Katie. And then she also said, that is how I choose to look at it too. God and my faith sees me through. Also, you always have to look over your shoulder. And she added, Rollis, it is exhausting. She lost her connection for a little bit. And then she said, Dr. Katie, I can so relate with the attitude. We have to schmooze, is what she said.
Schmooze, yeah.
And then Noelle said, Dr. Katie, you are so incredibly right. I will always live by the quote, seek first to understand, then be understood.
That's
I love
good
that.
one.
That's Stephen Covey.
Really good one.
I love that one. 7 Habits. That's a great book.
And I think to build on that point, Rollis, I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
The worst part is when you're in the midst of it, there's no one to your right and to your left that you can look to, for the most part, that you could say, did you see what I just see? What I saw? Did you hear what I just heard? Like, there isn't that.
That's true. Yeah.
There isn't someone that's called and say, you would not believe what I just went through, that would be a witness to what you're going through. So you're dealing with this, in solitude, right? Where you have to manage your own emotions.
Right.
You get through. You could have an event at one meeting and remember that, oh my gosh, I have another meeting and I can't go in there with, my feelings. So I have to manage what I'm feeling because I have to keep moving.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the comment about it being exhausting because
and isolating.
You really are there because you can't necessarily. And you can't call someone like another CNO, another house, say, girl, you won't believe I just went through it. And like, yeah, I have my own too. Like, there's some solace in that, but having someone be a witness and help you with going through that in the moment, it's just typically not there.
Yeah. But
I do. I wanted to bring up something, but you can go ahead. I don't want to take us off target.
No, feel free. Go for it.
I thought of something in terms of the other aspect that came up when I was doing my study about being a woman in the C-suite. So in addition to having the burden of, or I won't call it a burden because it's a blessing, but in recognizing that you are a minority or considered a minority, but then there's also the gender bias.
Oh,
right?
yes, right. We haven't even addressed
in the
that.
C-suite, and particularly with nurses not being seen as business savvy or as leaders, because we're trained as clinicians. So there's not that respect that we're able to handle the administrative or leadership or business aspects that are required in the C-suite. So that was also an issue.
Interesting. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. D, you just called out the triple index
Yeah.
issue, right? Where Black, you're female, you're Black, and a nurse in the C-suite. You got those three things to wade through, and
yeah,
that tends to be, that's the issue. You're working from a ditch most of the part. You have to continually prove yourself.
So to borrow a phrase that I grew up with, what you're telling me is that because of this, is that CNOs are as scarce as hen's teeth because of black female ones, because of being female, being Black, and then the hurdles just become a nurse because there's not that many of them.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, there's the whole notion of the boys' club and not really fitting in with the rest of the norm that is in the C-suite. And then there's the other paradigm that, is it because nurses are mostly female why they're inept at being leaders, or is it just because they are nurses that they're not good leaders?
you just hit on something here.
It's very nuanced.
Okay, if anybody has watched Shark Tank, a lot of them know about Kevin O'Leary. He calls himself Mr. Wonderful. Okay, you watch that. Okay, so there was an interview I saw with him. I think it was a couple of years ago, and he's bought lots of companies, done lots of partnerships through the Shark Tank. And one of the things he said is that out of all the companies that he managed, look, we lost Katie's video there.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have her back. Out of all the companies that he's managing or running, he got with his assistant to run and do some research on it, right? He said all the women-run companies were profitable. Only a small fraction or a percentage of the men-run companies were profitable out of the ones that he had done deals with. And he was like, what is going on here? So there may be a perception that possibly the woman leader might not be as strong, but the reality in his case was, he's like, how can we find more women-run businesses? Because that's where we're making more money. So it was just, and going back to the example of the NFL, same thing. We may have these certain things that we think are there in the reasons, but a lot of times there's no there. It's actually not even valid when we actually test. That's why I love testing. With marketing, it's just kind of like test and measure. You just test it. You can think all you want, but until you put it out there, you don't know. That's why we run tests all the time, right? Okay, I want to ask our audience a question. Have you observed any of these behaviors that we're talking about? And if so, do you have any possible solutions? We want to hear all the possible, because I know we've got some pretty smart folks who are watching. And we talked about, I think, one solution that I think was great was, and Katie mentioned this, is meeting with that person, having the lunch or the breakfast with the person, getting to understand them better. I thought that was like fantastic. If there was like one takeaway, that's what I like so far about what you said, which was great. If we're talking to an audience here that perhaps may be female, maybe they're not African American, but they're female, what advice would you give for them? Or if they're of minority in general or Black, what advice would you give to them as well in leadership? And then if you want to throw in a leadership overall, doesn't matter what you look like, maybe we could work that in as well. Who wants to take that first? Dr. Dunkley, you want to try that one?
So advice. I'm sorry. I thought you were posing the question to those that were in the
well,
watching,
them too. I want them to answer it, but I also want you to answer as well. I'm sorry. So
got it.
I confused everybody. The comments, I want you to answer that, but then I'm also going to let my panel answer those questions while we're waiting for, because they usually lag about a minute or two behind us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that so there's two sides to it, right? So there are the organizations that we work for that have some of the onus to develop leaders, right, from within. And so placing structures and strategies in place that can help develop leaders within the organization, and like really being intentional about developing leaders. So
yes.
Not just by, leaving it up to chance, but having a structured program that can help to develop leaders. But then there's also the onus that has to be on the individual who is thinking of pursuing these types of roles to develop themselves, right? So seeking, a career coach or taking a workshop or being proactive in your own success, right? So there's two sides to that. It can't just be one or the other. And I think really being true to yourself in terms of what's a good fit for you, where your strengths lie, because it may not be that you want to be a manager. Maybe you want to be a nurse educator, right? And maybe that's a better fit instead of leading a team of people. So there are so many avenues within nursing. Being true to who you are, really studying and knowing what your passion is and what area you want to focus in, and having a plan. A lot of times we're just out there flailing. Or it could be like some preconceived notion of what you should be, but really looking within and figuring out what that is, creating a strategy, a plan, having a plan, so at least if you veer a little bit, you had somewhere in the middle where was your launching point and your foundation. So I think those are just some of the tips that I have right off.
Those are very good.
Thank you.
How about you, Dr. Boston-Leary?
Yeah, I think Dr. Dunkley hit on most of the key points, and we're both in the coaching space, so we tend to have these conversations a lot. I tried. There are two key things that I try to do with people that reach out to me for that I coach is, let's start with how far out are you comfortable looking at where you want to be? And there are people that will say a year, 3 years, or 5. Try not to stretch it too far to 10. Because that's where there's so much that can happen.
Right.
And then once you project, and that goes to what Dr. Dunkley said about having a plan, determine what you want to do, not just leave it up to chance. Because I remember I used to have a number of nurses as a CNO that will finish their degrees and meet with me and say, okay, I got my doctorate degree. What do you have for me? And I'll ask them, what do you want to do? And they'll say, I never thought about that.
Oh yeah.
I just knew that I'll just get this degree and I will come and see you. So It's always, you have to figure out what you want to do. And part of the way to getting there is think about someone you've admired. Like, who have you been following over the past few years? Whose career most inspires you in your field, and or maybe even not, and try to see what that person did, role model or your hero that you can probably mimic and learn what they did and try to incorporate that in your path to getting to where you want to go. So, with my folks, I always try to, I have this social capital exercise that I do. And I say, let's build your social capital. Like, well, what's that? I said, well, here's a worksheet. Like, who is your mentor? Who is your role model? Who is your professional peer? Who is your professional junior? And who's your coach? And if you fill out that worksheet and you be intentional about leveraging those relationships appropriately to help you get to where you want to go, in your vision, your destination postcard is the accomplishment of someone you really admire in your field, of course you're going to get there.
Right.
So that's what that's what is required. And in that social capital is that mentor, which is what Dr. Dunkley was mentioning, that would help guide you, right? You can learn from their mistakes, even do things in a shorter period of time, because we do trial and error. And I'll tell you, the reason why I and Dr. D probably has the same testimony on this. I have a lot of degrees because I felt that I needed it to stand out. That is the bottom line. I felt that it's the ammunition that I needed to be seen.
Yes.
When I was in nursing school, I felt invisible. I was one of the top performing people in my class, but I was not seen at all. So that was where I built in me the need to continue to add to my letters to my name because that's a way to be seen.
That
Yep,
is
absolutely.
very interesting. See, you're saying some stuff that's kind of like the elephant in the room. I know a lot of people thinking about that, but they don't say it. That makes a lot of sense. I love
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
mentioned that. Wow, that's so true. Yeah,
It's real.
you have to do that so that you are seen.
Yep.
That I am someone that needs to be taken notice of because look
Right.
what I
To be
got
taken
behind my name.
seriously.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's strong.
Yeah, I think that you hit that right on the head, and it would be the testimony of a lot of us who have amassed all these degrees and certifications. It's like, yes, there's that internal drive to want to be the best at what you do, but there's also that external pressure that you're like constantly feeling like you have to prove,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
Yeah. But at the same
and
time,
be
if
seen.
I were coaching someone today, I'll probably give them the Reader's Digest version of the shortcuts to get there, and
Yeah.
not have to go through all these years of academic work, you know.
Yes.
right.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that's part of what we have to do for the people that come up after us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I
And
appreciate
there
that.
has to be a sense of humility too for those of us who, I don't want to say have quote unquote arrived, but you have to be willing to give back, and not create this sense of competition
Yes,
either,
yes.
right? Holding all the. I used to have a CNO who said, anything you want to know is between this year and this one. All you have to do is ask me, and I'll give it to you. And I appreciated that because she was willing to share her knowledge. It wasn't like this
Yeah.
big secret, that she held on to, and that's what we need to be able to do as well.
So
So true.
let's see if we got some answers from the comments. So Joe, did we get any answers to my questions about what are some solutions or that sort of thing, or any questions or
So
comments?
we have more comments from Dr. Z.
Okay.
Said Dr. Katie, managing the emotions is also exhausting because you have to keep reinventing yourself and emotions on the fly to survive the day. And then she was also saying, Dr. Dunkley, so true. Always conducting yourself authentically and respectfully, even in the face of the adversity you may be facing. Not reacting the way they expect you to throws them off. The educator role, managing the education debt, is what I have done and want to continue doing, but finding the right organization is difficult. The pandemic has derailed this.
Mm.
And then
Go ahead.
She goes, oh my goodness, I had to get this doctoral degree to have my ideas and innovation heard, to give credence, Dr. Katie.
Wow. Yep. And then there's a Sage Smith that said something too earlier. I saw.
I'm asking her to put it again because I don't see it.
Okay. I think I'm able to see it. It says when I lived in southern Georgia, Crisp County, not a woman of color, but I found the strong segregation between blacks and whites incredibly strong. Coming from the north, it didn't matter much to me, but while in Georgia, it was a daily battle right before my eyes. Wow.
It's an interesting picture that can be painted depending on what state you work in, and even within that state, depending on what facility you work in, public versus private, one neighborhood versus the other. It's, you, like I said, you can get lost in the comfort of where you work, but you step out and you see the disparities that are going on in reality.
Wow, that's something. Okay, so just to lighten it up a little bit, I got a little question I want to ask you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, let's see here. Would you rather be so smart that you went to college at age 13 or have gone through high school normally without ever being remotely challenged academically? Comments. So those are comments. I want you to answer the same question. Which one would you go with? So now I want to ask you guys, which one would you go with?
So it was college at 13 or...
Yeah. Would you have rather been able to enter college at age 13 or have gone through high school normally without ever being remotely challenged academically?
Jeez.
Yeah, where do you get these?
I mean, option 2 sounds tempting, but the part about not being challenged, that's not going to set me up for success at all. You need challenges, you know.
Yeah.
But being
This is
being a
how mature some
13-year-old, geez, I'm going to have to go with A. I can't, you know.
Okay, you're gonna go with 13. Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Katie?
I agree.
You
I
agree?
agree. I agree. Yep.
Why do you agree? Why would you rather go for it at 13?
Well, because well, first of all, I hated high school. I really did.
Oh, man.
You know, I got into I got into trouble with some girls with a party line and talking to a boy I shouldn't be talking to. It was just so dramatic my last couple of years. I wouldn't mind skipping high school.
Okay.
I guess I gravitated to the 13-year-old because I was always sort of more mature for my age, and people still say that of me. You know, but I just can't imagine skating through high school with not being challenged. It doesn't really prepare you for the real world. So at least if I go to school at 13, although, you know, developmentally I might be a little out of place.
Right.
It'll actually give me a glimpse of what the real world is like, you know.
I tell you what, that would be a crash course. I mean, at 13, right into college.
Yes. Oh yeah, rude awakening. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious to what folks in the comments say about that. So let me know when Joe, when you see something come up. Okay, I got one more for you here. Would you rather have photographic memory or extrasensory perception?
Photographic memory.
Ah,
I
wow.
agree.
I didn't even need to hear the other option. Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, why were you so strongly about that? Why do you feel that's so important?
I mean, just the nerd that I am, that would have helped me by leaps and bounds to be able to remember everything I studied. Like, just, you know,
Sure.
yeah.
What about you, Katie? Same thing?
Same thing.
Yeah.
60 Minutes did there's a name for people who have that extreme ability.
I remember that.
And there's the actress from Taxi was
Yes.
on there. She'll remember, like she remember what she wore on a certain day in September in 1960. I mean,
Jeez.
like
Yeah.
I would love to have that ability.
Mm-hmm.
That would be amazing. Which shows the power of our brains. We don't all get that, obviously, but it just shows how much data our brain can hold if you can hold every day of your life.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. And they were like, I think they identified like less than 10 people in the world that have that extreme ability to recall information.
Wow.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Wow. Okay, so before we close out, Joe, do you see any comments we can read off real fast?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
So Dr. Z said, Rollis, I lived it. I finished high school at age 15 and then college at 17. So I cannot really answer this. She said being so young was the challenge.
Oh, wow. Okay, very interesting. Well, this has been a great discussion today, guys. I really enjoyed it. I say guys, I mean ladies.
All good.
Okay. I really enjoyed it today. It was eye-opening for me, and hopefully it was for those in the audience. For those folks in the audience, let us know what resonated from you, what you heard today, what resonated with you, what actionable things you think you can take. If you're not a minority, how you could perhaps help someone who is, and then of course if you are a minority, how you can better your situation. I think we heard things really on both sides here. I want to thank both of you. Any last words you want to leave us with? First of all, Dr. Dunkley, then I'll go to Dr. Boston-Leary.
Let's see. I think that if there are any aspiring leaders out there right now that are maybe hit that brick wall or still trying to figure out where they want to go, I would just say, do a lot of introspection, really do your research, and do as much as you can to kind of open up your horizons and develop yourself. It's a tough road, but it's achievable. As you can see, you have examples like Dr. Leary and and others who have gone before you. So, get the help that you need. There are resources available. And definitely get yourself a mentor. If you can't get a sponsor, at least start with a mentor.
Love that. And how do people to connect with you? What's the best way?
So I can be reached at iamdrd1@gmail.com. That's email, or on social media. You can reach me on Instagram at iamdrd, or by my name here, as displayed here on LinkedIn.
Okay. We also have you tagged as well on this post, so
Great.
they can also click on that and look at your profile. Okay, Dr. Boston-Leary.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Dr. Dunkley said. Nurses in general, right? We need to just invest in yourself in a number of different ways, for self-care because of everything that's happening right now with COVID, and also in the professional sense. And don't leave everything up to chance like I did at one point in my career. You want to be strategic and working towards your goals. And lastly, with hurt nurses and hospital systems being overwhelmed, wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance. We've got to do that consistently.
Yes.
We are in a bad place right now, and this is supposedly not the worst of it. So.
Right, absolutely. No, thank you to both of you for your time. There's lots of other things you could be doing, but you decided to spend your time and your knowledge with us. So we appreciate that very much. And keep up the great work and what you're doing. You guys are doing a lot of great things, so please continue to do that. And I look forward to our next big discussion. Katie, we're going to have more CNOs that's going to be joining us in January, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But again, thank you, both of you, for being here today. And guys, have a great rest of the day who are watching. Feel free and join us tomorrow. We do have a program tomorrow, right, Joe? That's right. Yeah, Fun and Games Friday tomorrow. So feel free and join us on Fun and Games Friday tomorrow. It's our last one of the year. This is my last Thursday Roundtable of the year, and the second to the last live show of the year. So thank you.
Okay, so you chose up. Closing out with a bang.
Yeah, we're closing out with a bang. In fact, let's give a little round of applause here for our last show. It's the last one of the year, guys. Wow, I can't believe it. It just hit me as I was saying that just now. So anyway, I hate to jump off everyone, but thank you for your time, for coming on and joining us. And bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, very good.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Okay, so I just stopped the record, and I got to stream for a couple more seconds, but if you guys have to jump off, no problem. But I'll tell you what, it was a fantastic session. We got a chance to say some things I think really resonated with folks. They could really relate to what you were saying, and so that was wonderful.
Awesome.